Well, hey everybody. My name is Jared Malott. I'm here with my good friend Mateo and this is the Coltist, Season 2, Episode 11. We're gonna go ahead and run it with
Yeah,
Michael
it's
Pittman
Michael Pittman.
Jr. Yeah. Fourth in the NFL in receptions, certainly a centerpiece in this offense, drafted in 2020 out of USC.
He
Um,
deserves an extension. We can go ahead and say get this guy an extension. He's worth like every single penny that you're gonna pay him.
I
Yeah,
really
just
like
sign him.
the Colts starting wide receivers.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
with it.
Yeah,
Um, So this obviously is an Indianapolis Colts Indiana Pacers podcast. So you're welcome for presenting you with a podcast option that covers both of Indy's professional sports. Uh, last week, we're definitely going to eat some crow this week. Last week,
yeah,
we were super
yeah,
excited. Colts are on a 4-game winning streak. Pacers are going to make the final of this in-season tournament and win the whole thing. Uh, And then the Colts get beat by 20 in Cincy, and the Pacers lose to the Lakers. And, it's been long enough since last time we spoke that there have been 3 basketball games. So the Pacers lost to the Lakers in the finals. That was of the in season tournament. That was after our podcast. Then they beat the Pistons and then have just lost to the Bucks last night. And I figure because of the kind of, I would say, audacity, the sort of
yeah,
like what in the world is happening with the Pacers game. We probably start with the Pacers tonight and say, obviously, uh, the way I perceived this in-season tournament is the Pacers were treating this like the playoffs.
yeah, yeah. It was evident.
And their whole goal was to get as far as you can in this. It's this good experience. And I noted that several Pacers players said, sometimes you play in a game and it's dead quiet. The crowd's not into it at all. But these in-season tournament games have felt like
Yeah,
a
crowd
playoff
was.
atmosphere. The crowd was really into that. And that it does a lot for your confidence playing when it's really loud. A lot of pressure on you. Um, say all that to say, last night, you know, most of this year, the knock on the Pacers has been that they're terrible defensively. And if there's a player in the league that will take advantage of bad defense, it's Giannis,
Yeah,
who goes off for 64 points. Um, also, notable, um, I don't know how to say his first name, but it's Tshiebwe, Oscar Tshiebwe, um,
yeah, yeah. I
out of
believe that's the name.
Kentucky. He got his first point last night at the free throw line as an NBA player, right? So it's like 2 moments happened at the end of the contest, right? Uh, Giannis had a career high 64 points, like record breaking. Um, but also one of the Pacers rookies scored his first point. And so way I perceived it is the Colts gathered the game ball afterward to get to their rookie. But I'm pretty sure they're playing on the road.
Yeah, yeah. They were playing on the road.
Yeah, they were at home. Yeah, Milwaukee was at home. Yeah.
Yeah,
So when you're
Milwaukee was at
playing on
home,
the
but
road, you gotta think the home team has priority on if they want to take up
yeah,
that
keep
game
the
ball.
game. But yeah,
Also, when you're at home and your franchise player scores 64 points, yeah, you'd kind of like to see him get the ball. But I'm with Mark Cuban actually, who owns an NBA team, and his perspective on that was, I'd be super proud of anybody that works for me that has a night like that. 64 points is outstanding, but that ball belongs to the rookie who just scored his first point in the NBA. And I'll just leave it at that. I don't care to argue with anyone. It's just like, hey, Mark Cuban generally has it right, and when he says that ball goes to the rookie, I'm gonna take his side
yeah.
here.
Yeah, and he
Um,
also, I believe he also, or I don't know if he said it, but there was a point made like, "Hey, Giannis, you have a chance of potentially, you're a great player, you have a great career ahead of you. Like there's a chance you outperform those 64 points. There's a big chance you get 70, 65. You outdo that.
Hmm?
You don't get a second first bucket. Like you get your first bucket and that's it.
Yeah.
And I was expecting, way, especially since it was proven that the Pacers did not take the ball. Like
Yeah.
there was a Bucks security member with the ball, and it's kind of blurry, but I saw a video, with the audio that Giannis, he was told like we have the ball, like the ball is ours. He was, pushing people around, making a scene, and I'm like, hey, it's just like I get it. Of course, this comes from before of the Pacers Bucks game in the in-season tournament,
Hmm.
where yeah, Tyrese did the little, the Dame time celebration, and but that's in the game. I mean, I'm all for. I really like this kind of rivalries where everyone kind of goes back and forth. I mean, I really like Lance Stephenson and what he did, against LeBron in those
Hmm.
Indiana Miami series. Like, I respect that. I like that it's a part of the game. It keeps things fun. Like, there's a rivalry, it gets cheapy, but all within the rules and within the court. Like, keep it
Yeah.
there. Like, there is no need for you to come running off the court and going into the Pacers locker room for a game ball, like I was, are you really going to drop that low?
I definitely enjoy watching Giannis play. He's just so dominant physically, and presents a challenge on both ends. Um, but um, didn't like what I saw last night, and kind of hope the league needs to quell this unkind violence issue that they've got. I've been off the bus for a while, but I've been saying like Draymond Green is a scourge upon this league, and that the league would look different without him in it, and for better. Um, Now the Pacers went out and signed. I think you were telling me before he's like a black belt. Like
Yeah, yeah, I
try that
believe
with
it's
him on the
like a
sideline. You know what I
second
mean?
degree black belt, and he's like, I read it today, like he's 22-0 in kickboxing fights.
Yeah.
He's 6'7", 240. He's gonna, I mean, don't try him. Like
Yeah.
that's the only thing that I can like. Don't try. We were talking about this before we started recording. Giannis, he was being kind of physical, kind of aggressive with Tyrese after the game, and Tyrese was cool. Tyrese was like going to giving handshakes, like they beat us, and he was not a sore loser. He was giving out handshakes. He was cool,
Yep.
and Giannis was like poking him in the chest, like "Go get me my ball, go get me my ball." And I want to see him try that with when there's a black belt
Right.
protecting perhaps your franchise player. And
Yeah.
since we're on the subject, the Pacers play the Bucks on New Year's Eve and on the 3rd of next year.
Hmm.
So it's definitely gonna. I mean, if you ask me, having watched a ton of NBA games, one of the two will happen. It will get either extremely cheapy to the point where fists are thrown and punches and kicks and some major fines and suspensions,
Yep.
or nothing is gonna happen and it will all just be like a bit of meh that it all
Well,
cools down before that.
hopefully Adam Silver got a hold of Giannis and said, "Hey man, love the passion you play with. Congratulations on a big game. If you ever act like that again, I'm biggest fine you'll ever see. You'd be lucky you get a paycheck the rest of the year. I don't want to see that. I certainly don't want you putting your hands on nobody, especially outside the frame of basketball. Like you was saying, like keep it on the floor, keep it, let them play the game. Just like
Yeah.
with the college football playoff, right? Everybody is all up in arms. Why don't we settle it on a field, right? It's because there's a lot of extracurricular stuff that's not very well managed. Here's a really good evidence piece, right? Post game scuffle. Um, Giannis putting his hands on a Pacers player. It's like you said, I'm willing to bet you get some beef behind him. Jalen Smith was out too, right? So it's another big guy, probably somebody that would like to defend Giannis and defend Halliburton from him, right? Um, so yeah, obviously, you don't want to let that kind of scar the sort of joy that the Pacers are bringing this year. Win or lose, like you said, they're not sore losers either. It's a bunch of
Yeah.
young players, and they're having success. They're 4 games above 500. They're only a couple games out of first place in their division. So it's like you said, like I expect that they'll make the playoffs. It is a long season. We're about quarter of the way through, as we sit right now. And all I've watched these Pacers do all year is get better. Um, the other night against Detroit, and I get it's Detroit, and it was like their 20th straight loss.
Yeah.
I don't care. Ben Mathurin off the bench had 30, and it's like, hey, most bench players aren't good for that.
No.
There's a drop off once you get into your bench, and I've spoke at length about how impressed with the Pacers' depth I am. So I'm not gonna run back down that hill. But say all that to say, I was really impressed with the Pacers, especially how young they are in an in-season tournament together. So like I said, free playoff experience, and that's
Yeah.
how they treated it, right? Like that's what I would have wanted for them. That's what they ended up doing. Hey, I'm happy to hear that for them. Um, and then to talk about the Colts, man. So obviously, um, going into Cincinnati, you and I kind of spoke on, hey, these last like 5 games are suddenly winnable, mostly due to quarterback health. Um, Obviously, you expect when you're watching the Cincinnati Bengals without Joe Burrow that there's going to be some step down in the quality of quarterback play, and so far, uh, Browning's held it together,
Yeah, Brown is, yeah, he's
outplayed
been,
Minshew, and didn't get as many reps. I noticed, I think Garner Minshew's like 26 for 43. Browning only threw like 26 balls. You know what I mean? And he didn't complete as many, but like he was productive on the ground and in the air, scoring touchdowns on the ground or in the air, and then he was a good runner of the football too. So obviously Colts get a little bit of a shock on the road, I think, even though it's a battle of backups, right? And you never know what's going to happen in a game
yeah,
like
and
that.
you don't expect, to lose this that badly, that like
Yeah,
by
by
20
20.
points, but it was, I mean, special teams mistakes, the offense couldn't get anything going. Jake Browning he looked even better than Joe Burrow. It was incredible to watch.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, is this guy supposed to be the backup? And the
Mhm.
amount, and what blew my mind, like what makes you say like, hey, this is clearly an off day and nothing is working.
Yeah.
You go out, you miss your first extra point, then you miss a field goal, then your special teams unit fumbles, and you're like, can this get any
Can it
worse?
get any
And
worse? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and then you get, that like you get a touchdown that's supposed to put you like not right back in the game, but at least, put you a bit closer to making it a competitive game.
Yeah.
And it gets called back for the stupid, like a weak holding call. And you're like, hey, yeah, this is just like, this is not
Just one
meant
of
to be
them
today.
days.
Yeah, one of them, like it always
If
happens
it
to every
could go
single
wrong,
team.
it would.
Yeah. And then, like that just happens.
Yeah, I mean,
I wanna
one of the
I mean, I
worst
wanna
outings I've seen
see.
for a while.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But you know what leaves me interested is like I want to see how Shane Steichen, how he rallies the troops, like how he deals with adversity in a key time, because you lost badly, and you don't have time to sulk on the loss and keep you know stay or get bummed down because of that, because you have another basically you have another game that defines whether you make the playoffs or not. This week I
Yep.
saw a chart that said, those type of charts that say how much your playoff probabilities increase if you win and how much they decrease if you lose. And the Colts was like the most important game, where if they lost, their chances of making the playoff dropped to, like, I believe it was 20%. And if they win, it's like a 65, 70%. It's like, hey, this is pretty much a must win game.
Yeah, and the Colts, what they've got going for them going into this Steelers game is a very similar issue. Kenny Pickett injured and out. Now I believe he's supposed to be ready by a game day, but he'll have missed a couple weeks, and he ain't been playing the greatest. Now offense is kind of ho hum. Steelers got a good defense, right? Good enough
Yeah, their
defense that they're
defense is
above
amazing. Yeah.
500 football team. Um, and say all that stuff we said last week to sit here and say like, oh, now they're gonna go, you know, um, if they were in Pittsburgh, I would be prepared to say like probably losing that game on the road to Mike Tomlin, to coaching. Um, at home, it's a little different story. It's also a 4:30 game. I have a feeling the Colts come out flat. That's been a problem we've had in the
Yeah.
past. Um, but the Colts aren't used to playing at 4:30, and I think that could be sort of the wrench that takes away your home field advantage. You got all these people that are gonna show up to your Colts game that'll have been drinking and tailgating all morning, right? They're gonna have to go lay down somewhere and take a nap so they can get up in time to get back to this game with any semblance of spirit, right? Because it'll all be gone by then. But yeah, you look at the last four games, and now I say even the game against the Texans late suddenly becomes winnable.
Yeah.
CJ Stroud out with a concussion. Now, this isn't me saying like, oh, he's out for a concussion, he's not going to play for a few weeks. No, I don't care if he misses 1 week, that is less continuity than if he just misses a quarter in a game and then he's back next week
Yeah, he's
playing
back.
and
Yeah.
plays every game until he plays us. Hey, that ain't great going into that game. Um, so yeah, I think obviously you get lucky that you're hosting the Steelers at home and not because the Colts are better at home. The Colts actually are a better
Yeah, they are
road team
better on
this
the
year.
road. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously on Christmas Eve you got to go to Atlanta. And that becomes a must win if you drop this game against the Steelers, but doesn't have a big impact on your ability to make the playoffs because Falcons aren't in the AFC, right? And then obviously the Raiders, who are currently winning last we checked 21-0 over the Chargers, who are just going to keep losing, huh?
Yeah.
Um, they suddenly are in the playoff picture too. So that game will also have playoff implications, but so will the Texans. So three of the next four games are against AFC opponents, all who are going to impact the Colts' probability to make the playoffs greater
Yeah.
than the game against the Falcons on Christmas Eve. But yeah, I think it didn't, the Colts losing, the Pacers losing to Lakers in the finals, it didn't really take me off of where I feel about these teams either. Um, it's kind of one of those seasons for the Colts where there's no amount of change can get you away from the math.
Yeah.
And the Colts won like four games last year, and it was real rough. And we picked fourth overall, and we got our guy, got our quarterback right, and he gets hurt. Hey man, lots of teams lose every game after that and are back picking in the top five and don't hold it together. But I think the Colts have a lot of players on their team with a lot of pride that are, I try to think about like DeForest Buckner, that big boy. He
Yeah.
does not put this uniform on to lose, right? And so it's kind of whatever the franchise needs, be damned. And it just so happens that the Colts, like we've said, as long as they can hold this group together, got a pretty good roster. A
Yeah.
young 6'5" quarterback that runs a 4.40 and has a rocket arm, um, and is more capable of putting points on the board. Um, can he turn this team from a barely misses the playoff team this year, which is
Yeah.
where
It's up.
I'm at now. I'm like, I don't know. This is where they could fall apart. Um, you know, when you really look at the numbers, Garner Minshew is below what you'd consider replacement level. Um, it's unfortunate because I like the guy and I'm glad that we got him. I mean, there's like 9 other quarterbacks I don't want, right? Um, and he really only had the one turnover, but he didn't need to turn it over much. Everybody else did, right? And everybody else had a bad day at work. Um, so obviously I want to sit here and say like I think the Colts bounce back. I think that getting to host a good football team that's gonna hit you. That's why I think about Pittsburgh is they're gonna be physical. They're not great on offense. It kind of remind me, and even their colors are black and gold. They remind me of the Iowa
Hmm.
Hawkeyes. Um, not gonna score a ton of points. Uh, I'd venture to say if you could put up 20 on them, you're probably winning. Um, but hell, I thought that the Colts had more in the tank than Cincinnati did, and they lost by 20, right? So
Yeah.
very much a week to week league. Fortunately for the Colts, and obviously say this with our fingers crossed, not a lot of injuries to talk about. They've been missing players here and there, but this is nowhere near as bad as it's been. So we're just lucky in that. Obviously, you'd love to get Jonathan Taylor back for a game or two this year,
Yeah.
after he had thumb surgery. Uh, I did notice, and I brought this up before we started recording, Zach Moss had 13 carries for like 28 yards.
Yeah. He was. Yeah.
Sounds
It
like they
was
gave up on the run
not a good
game.
day. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And even
and
like, and another thing I noticed is that some of the run plays that Zach Moss was getting, it was either RPOs or audibles from Garner Minshew. There were no, or at least to the naked eye, perhaps there was, and I missed it, or I could very easily be wrong. But from what I saw, it seemed like the Colts had no intent of like truly running the ball, like I formation, going heavy,
yeah, like a
and trying to
dedicated
run it
run.
down. Yeah, dedicated run game. Like you're playing like the worst run defense in the NFL. They were ranked 32, and they did an amazing job against you. And you have your offensive lineman, you have your interior offensive line is all healthy. You have Zach Moss, and Zach Moss, he's a great running back. He's a really good running back. You should be able to run the ball at least, at the very least, make it decent, like make it 15 carries, 75 yards, anything like that. You should be able to do that, not 13 carries for 28 yards. That's inexcusable if you ask me.
Yep. And I think a lot of people would point to the fact that the Colts defense gave up 14 points in the third quarter, and that probably took you out of running the ball much, at least with any intention, right? Um, but yeah, like I said, fortunately for the Colts, have a complement of offensive weapons, and they've had a dearth for a while where we really didn't have, obviously Jonathan Taylor, but like if you take Jonathan Taylor out and then just start going backwards, you don't get very far back before you're like, man, who are the Colts wide receivers? Um, so now, in my eyes, based on this year, you got to look ahead at offensive and defensive line depth. And then obviously got rid of Shaq. Fortunately, I feel like the Colts can win games and it doesn't negatively impact your ability to roster build. You don't need one of the things that I think Chris Ballard said, it's not nearly as sexy as you think picking in the top like 5. You don't want to be doing that. If you're doing that, it means you just lost. And probably it affected somebody's job, right? Probably traded a guy away or let him walk, right? That you went out and got that you wanted here. I think we were talking about in the Discord about how good a year. I would lose his name right as I was going to say it. The cornerback played for the Patriots for a long time. Then came played for the Colts. Now he's moved on. He's having a really good year as a cornerback. Ugh. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Who's a corner for the Colts last year. Anyway, you keep a player like that when you win, right? That guy wants to stick around and see what it's about, right? But when you lose and you're picking the top
Yeah, they're
5
out.
and it's a quarterback, hey, I'm getting up here. And I think he was like 31 now. Hey, get rid of me. Let me go somewhere else, right? And of course, like Colts fans were up in arms then, right? But that doesn't happen to winning teams. And what a GM wants is a GM wants the same offensive and defensive fronts for as many games possible because
Yeah.
that gives him the best look at the second level of the defense and his skill players on offense. You get tons of, hey, you had a clean pocket, kid. What happened? Right? Instead of, hey, tackle
Yeah,
hadn't
not
played
your fault.
much. This Jared Voorhees is 38 years old and the fireman. We're going to sign him off the street and he's going to end up having to play tackle for the Colts, right? Well, if that guy's not a swinging door, right? And that's a big thing I'd look at if I'm dreading that Raiders game, right? Max Crosby's going to chew somebody up. Hopefully it's not Garner Minshew because, like I said, each of these games are winnable. You're not out of them ahead of time, right? Where it's just like, oh, this team's just got way more talent and attention to detail. Like they're gonna beat us. I am concerned with this upcoming game. Mike Tomlin is exactly the kind of coach to come in and sneak and beat you and make it to the playoffs and probably win a football game. He's that kind of guy. I do have faith in Shane Steichen, though. One of the things that we were talking
Yeah.
about before we started recording today is that we said, despite Jonathan Taylor, Anthony Richardson, the offensive line basically being a turnstile all year long, haven't had a same five on the O line in 5 games maybe. Um, but top 10 in scoring offense. And no, this does not include like pick sixes. This is scoring offense.
Yeah.
Now, Colts did go out and spend a bunch of money on a kicker on Matt Gay. And then also when I was I always like to do a little bit of research. Colts special teams are normally really good, actually. Um, Punting even really good. Did you know Rigoberto Sanchez, the only punter in the NFL that has no touchbacks,
Yeah.
and is also like top 10 in yards per punt. So not only does he have a leg, but he's accurate. That's just a punter, right? You'd think like that ain't that big. It's a huge deal. It's the difference between a winning team, a championship team, and a team that doesn't have it, right? So the hope, obviously, it's very obvious to me the Colts are well coached. Whether that's what happens when you get out there and under the bright lights, it's a whole nother animal. But it, it does, it means something to me when I don't know, I've been watching football, I feel like too long, but most of the time when your starting quarterback goes down
Yeah,
and
it
your
all goes
and your
to
backup is not good, like top half of the league at quarterback, you don't win games.
nah, yeah.
And
You end up
and
picking in
very
the top five.
frequently the teams that are drafting up there, like how many years in a row have we watched the Lions draft in the top 10, right? Trying to team build through the draft, and they're having to draft marquee players that if they stick, they're going to have to pay, right? It's not a good spot to be in. You don't want to draft. You every now and then you gotta get up there, get your guy, but like you don't really want to do that every year. So that just happens to coincide with the fact that the Colts are well built roster. A lot of people have been knocking Chris Ballard and his ability to team build. How about get rid of Shaq Leonard and then get better linebacker play after, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people, I mean, people have done nothing but question everything Chris Ballard's done since he got here. But how about that though? When you stop giving away reps and get rid of this guy that you're overpaying and say, hey man, see if you can get an opportunity elsewhere. Um, so yeah, a lot of things going on in both organizations that
Yeah.
aren't necessarily football, but um, obviously the
Yeah, and even
Pacers.
though
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
like like even though, the Colts were blown out and dropped perhaps their worst game, this
Yeah.
season, and the Pacers lost the final and now lost to the Bucks. Like I'm still thinking exactly the same way I was thinking a week ago. Like I'm not saying right now, okay, Colts are not making the playoff and the Pacers are still a superstar away from being a true contender. I'm still really high on both teams. I still think the Colts make it, not because they are a good NFL team, but mostly they are playing, the Falcons, Steelers, and the Raiders. Those are three really bad teams, and they should be able to beat them, and that should be enough to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
I don't think they win a single game in the playoffs. I think they lose like first round exit for sure. Pacers probably still a long way to go this season.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm still excited about the future of both teams.
Yeah. And I think that your excitement's warranted because like again, I keep coming back to that, but like if this was any other team, they would be like 3-11 at this point, and there'd be no sense in watching the game because everybody's just gonna have a bad day, right? Instead, that outing against Cincinnati, it feels like an outlier to me. That feels like a random football is random. Sometimes the ball doesn't go your way, right? And it's like you said, uh, a fumble on a return, a missed extra point. If that isn't especially when you go out and spend all that money on
Yeah,
a reliable kicker and he duffs an extra point, it's like, oh, today's gonna be a long day. The people that don't normally make mistakes. Man, it's tough to overcome that, right? It's it's hard enough out here when you've got a quarterback turning the ball over, right? Not just throwing interceptions.
yeah,
He was fumbling too. And he only had one turnover, I say that sort of tongue in cheek, right? He only turned it over once. It didn't matter. The kicking game, the special teams unit, right? That third unit is what let the Colts down last week. It gave up short fields and off turnovers to Cincy, and that's how you get beat by 20 in a game that you were favored to win, by the way. And that's how it can be it's how it could be the rest of the year. If the Colts decide that they're done winning and that they have proven all these players have proven all they need to prove to this franchise for them to get to stick around, right? At least until training camp, right? If that's the mindset, then you can drop these last four games and you don't need to win them because you don't need to be in the playoffs, right? Or I think, like I said, that Bengals game has to be such an outlier that it reinvigorated everybody. That they say, you know what, we were on the right path. We were all doing the right things. We even did all the
yeah,
right things going into last week. And if it could have went wrong, it did. But that has no impact on how I feel, right? Or how hard I'm going to
yeah,
play or prepare. It's not going to change anything. Um, if anything, it galvanizes us and it brings us together and makes us not want to feel that way, right? And they'll go out there and win. And again, I think it starts with winning at home, right?
yeah,
And then obviously win against the division and conference opponents, and then win all games, right? But yeah, if the Colts can get this win on Sunday, it's like you said, it's like it increases their odds of making the playoffs
yeah.
to like
Like by a
65%.
ton.
Yep. And that's a great spot to be in because, like I said, there are so many alternate universes where the Colts have like 1 to 4 losses. It ain't just Shaq Leonard asking out, right? You know what I mean? There's a timeline where this went far worse. And instead, as I've stated before, most teams only improve 1 to 2 wins. The most a team will improve is about 4 wins different than the year prior. And they've already done that. In my eyes, it's like, hey, you've already maxed out what you were supposed to do. You win one more game, you win 8 games. I think as a rookie head coach with a backup quarterback, and man, doesn't that set Shane Steichen up for a nice long head coaching career, right? Where if that's sort of the floor, because I have a feeling here in year 2, your team's going to be even better. Um, but yeah, I'm definitely excited. It's just like you got brought back down to
Yeah.
earth, right?
Yeah, of
Right,
course.
where we
Yeah,
were like, man,
it's not the
it,
same like if we had won, the in-season tournament and the and the game against the Bengals, I
you
would
better
be
look
here
out.
right now. Like I would be here right now probably like through the roof saying like, I'm sorry for the curse, fuck you all. We are world champions. Like I'm
Yeah, right.
counting this as a ring. I don't care.
Five wins in
Uh,
a row.
5 wins in a row, a
Three of
really
them would
good
have been
chance of
road
making the playoffs.
games. Like if that was what would have happened, you'd be warranted. Who can beat us right now? We've won
Yeah.
5 games in a row, and most of those were on the road. Like nobody wants to see the Colts, right? You that's what you want to see Dan Orlovsky saying. But like I said,
Yeah,
this
I
to
mean it
me
happens.
is a breaking point for the Colts. This loss against the Bengals, either it breaks the team, they lose out. Hey, the hard reality is, I told you from the beginning, most teams only improve 1 to 2
Yeah,
games
right.
year to year, and at most, if everything goes right, 4 games. So for the record, if your team is just at or below 500, yes, that means that you could improve enough to win your division and be the number one seed year to year. So middling isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Um, but right now, and I also got to keep this in mind. Colts are really only like 1 game out of the division,
Yeah.
and with these quarterbacks fallen, right? All Gardner Minshew's got to be his last man standing, right? All he's got to do is make sure he keeps himself healthy, because all these other quarterbacks keep going down. And that's what really had me thinking like, man, the Colts could really get on top of this back part of this schedule and ride it out. If they run into Pittsburgh without their starting quarterback, and then you run into the Texans without CJ Stroud, right? Obviously concussed and like in their protocol and probably going to be back by then. I'm not even saying he's going to miss it, but like to be in that spot, it's like, oh, it's sort of a war of attrition, last man kind of standing style. There's the tippy tip top of the league, and then there's this bunch of teams trying to get the wild card, and all of them have quarterback issues, except for Buffalo, right? But yeah, I feel good about this episode. You ready to
Yeah.
let them go?
Yeah, ready.
All right. So yeah, the Colts again um on Sunday play the Steelers at home at 4:30,
Yeah,
by the way.
so put an alarm on your phone right now because you perhaps all of you listening, you're thinking like, okay, yeah, we play on Sunday, 3 o'clock. Sorry, it's 3 o'clock in here in Argentina. I believe it's like 1 p.m. there in Indiana usually. And
Hmm.
no, they play on Saturday, so don't don't sleep on that because you might very well miss the game. So remember that we play on Saturday.
Oh, they play on Saturday. Even I
Yeah,
brain farted it, and I'm the one
yeah,
reminding people like, hey,
yeah.
they
It
play at
happens,
4:30 on
and it's on
Saturday.
Saturday. Yeah,
Yeah, they
so
play 4:30
a
on
lot of people
Saturday.
might forget that.
Pacers play tomorrow. It's 7 p.m. on Friday night at the Wizards. And yeah, this has been season 2, episode 11 of uh of the Cultist. Have a great week. Enjoy the games, and we'll
And
see
see
you
you.
before next
Yeah, we'll
week's
see you
games.
next week.